Welcome to FinTech Founders, the podcast where we sit down and speak with the entrepreneurs changing the financial industry. In each episode, you'll learn about a founder, the company they built, and their vision for the future. My name's Nicholas Beliveau, your host for the show and the head of marketing at FinTech Cadence. FinTech Cadence is a community builder that's developing Canada's FinTech leaders of tomorrow. To learn more about what we do, visit fintechcadence.com. Hello and welcome to today's episode. Today I have the pleasure of being joined by Phil Barrar, founder and CEO of Mylo. How's it going, Phil?
It's going great. How about yourself?
Very good. Thank you. Thank you for being here.
It's my pleasure. I'm happy to be here.
So to kick things off, what I'd like to start with is to learn a bit about your company. So could you quickly tell us about Mylo?
Absolutely. So Mylo is Canada's most popular saving and investing application. We help Canadians achieve their financial goals in a couple of very simple and easy ways. The first way is we connect directly to your credit and debit card. Every time you make a purchase, Mylo rounds that purchase up to the nearest dollar. We take that spare change and we put it into a fully managed investment account. We started this because we found 53% of Canadian millennials had less than $1,000 in the bank account. There was a major technology divide between how consumers wanted to consume their products and the way that the traditional incumbents had been offering solutions. And, regardless of how much money they made, they didn't have a problem earning, but they had a problem with putting money aside. And we really found that roundup solution helped our users get started in building that first kind of savings platform.
Yeah, because it's a no-brainer at the end of the day. If it's just being invested for you, you don't need to think about it. It makes the task easier. In general, what does the adoption rate look like for your company? It started in 2017.
Yeah, absolutely. So we started on iPhone in July 2017, on Android in December 2017, and we have become the largest wealth management platform in the country in terms of a mobile app that helps people save and invest their money. Opened up over 500,000 investment accounts in that 2-year period. So definitely very popular amongst Canadians, and right now only available in Canada, but from coast to coast to coast. So we are very much inclusive in making sure it was accessible from day one across the entire country, and excited to bring it outside the Canadian border soon.
And then when people put their spare change into Mylo, how does that investment actually work?
So in 2017, we actually bought an asset management firm called Tactics Asset Management. And we bought them not only because they had a fantastic team to be able to come on and help us out. Liam Chung essentially became my co-founder at that point through that acquisition 2 years into building the business. But we also had all the regulatory licenses that we needed in order to get started. So we're a portfolio manager, we're an investment fund manager, and exempt market dealer, and we use all 3 of those licenses to actually get up and running. So through that acquisition, we actually are able to manage everyone's money directly on our platform. So the roundups that you have, the spare change that you have actually goes into a fully managed investment account. You have a portfolio manager that manages that investment account for you. You get a risk profile associated with your global risk profile and the risk profile of your individual goal. So you'll answer about 5 or 6 KYC questions during account opening, and then say you're saving for a vacation. Well, that's short term, you'll be put in something more conservative, but if your global risk profile is something more aggressive, and you're saving for retirement or down payment on a house, well, that will probably match closer to your global risk profile. And what we do is we invest in 5 different portfolios made up of low cost ETFs, and your money is invested directly into those ETFs.
That's really cool, because often when I speak to people about investing in the stat you say where millennials have, most millennials have no investments. And just in Canada overall, we were speaking about this last week, in Canada, savings are $852 on average for households in Canada, which is very, very low. A lot of people think, well, I don't need to save for my retirement. It's not something that people are that conscious about. But for short-term purchases, like a vacation, like you mentioned, or,
The
holidays, or even if you're thinking about buying a house in 5 years, which is still, let's say, medium term, well, people prefer having that money in cash versus putting it in investments where it can fluctuate and there's risk involved.
Mm-hmm.
So you mentioned short-term purchases. Is that the most popular way that you're attracting people? into Mylo, or it's for long-term investments as well?
So it's definitely for a hybrid of short-term and long-term investments. So a little bit of reason why people aren't getting started, they don't know where to start. They don't feel like they feel like they have to go and do a deep dive research and learn the fundamentals, and it's something that they put off to another day. They don't feel like they have enough money to get started, or they don't feel like they have the time to be able to do all of those things. So everyone knows they should be doing it. Everyone's heard of investing. They all think it's the right thing to be doing with your money, which it is. But they put it off for whatever one of these reasons. Baby shower comes up, I'll do it next weekend. Something else happens. In-laws are in town. And all of a sudden, you're in 2020, and you haven't started yet, right? So we really removed all the barriers by being able to create, again, directly through a mobile device. It's a 3-minute sign-up process. You get started with your spare change, but then you can also contribute through recurring or one-time deposits. So you get some extra Christmas money, you can put it in. You want to put in a vacation coming up soon, you put in extra, $30 a week, you can do that as well. So that's how we've built the platform to be more inclusive and easier to get started. But from that perspective, we are a goal-based platform. So you actually go through, and rather than saying, this is my investment account, here are my returns, and here's what it looks like, it's more, no, I'm saving for this vacation, I'm saving for retirement, and I'm saving for a down payment on a house. And you can have those 3 goals set up individually within the Mylo platform. Each one has its own investment profile. So putting into your vacation fund, well, your money's going to be invested in a money market account, which is essentially a high interest savings account, generating right in the ballpark of 2% annual returns on that product, which is significantly more than you'd get in a traditional savings account. So you do see a lot of people saving for short-term goals on the Mylo platform, and it is fundamentally still the best thing they can be doing with their money, because they're getting those returns that they wouldn't otherwise be getting from their traditional savings account. But then again, if you want to start saving for retirement, you can do those side by side and have 2 different investment strategies all led in the right direction, and you don't have to worry about it because the portfolio manager is taking care of it for you.
Yeah, and at the end of the day, it's just about starting. That's the number one thing about investing. You just have to start doing it.
The dirty little secret is, contribution makes more sense than, typically the returns that people look at it and be like, well, I made, $2 in returns this year. And I'm like, yeah, you haven't put that much money into your account. So focus on contribution. The returns will come over time. They'll compound it. Getting started early is important, but getting started and putting money aside is the first thing you want to do. So I tell people focus on contributions, and the rest we'll take care of the rest.
Absolutely. So I'd love to learn a bit more about you now, your story, and how Phil became the founder of Mylo. Where let's start with your education. Where did you study in finance?
So I did not study in finance. Maybe one step before my education, I actually was born and raised in the U.S. So I grew up in New Hampshire, and I actually came to Concordia University because I was baptized here when I was a baby, believe it or not. So when you are baptized in Quebec, it's the equivalent of being born in Quebec, and you get to go to school for $3,000 a year.
I didn't know that.
It's a great loophole, and that's probably one of the things I'm great at finding the opportunities there. And so I was really excited. I was looking at schools in Boston, and they were about $50,000 a year, and I could go to school in Montreal. And Concordia is a great school. Montreal's a great city, and it cost me next to nothing. I don't have to pay student loans. It was the right financial move for me to make. So that's how I ended up in Canada. That's how I ended up in Montreal.
But you didn't think of that when you were getting baptized. It was afterwards. I'm guessing,
afterwards.
unless you're a baby genius.
I was like, I'm Canadian. Maybe I can qualify for some special rates. And then I really did my digging, my research, because that's what I do, and I found this. So that's what brought me here, and I was really excited about that. I studied in John Molson School of Business. Studied a major in management with a minor in marketing. And I have to say, I wasn't necessarily the best student. I was someone who liked to get their hands dirty, and got involved with the Concordia's Entrepreneurship and Management Association. I actually started the entrepreneurship minor. So at Concordia, if you take the entrepreneurship minor, that was because of my initiative back in 2008 when I went
No
to
way.
go
Very cool.
bug our teacher for family business. I'm like, why isn't there an entrepreneurship class? I want to learn about entrepreneurship, right? And funny story, I actually took an entrepreneurship class and got a D on the midterm. And I went back to the teacher and I'm like, Peter, why did I get a D on this? I went back, I reread it, and you know, it totally makes sense. And he goes, okay, let me take a look. His TA graded it, obviously, and he comes back and says, well, it's because you answered like an entrepreneur. And he says, this is the theory of entrepreneurship. So he says, take your D. You know, it doesn't mean anything. You know, overall, I wasn't that bad of a student, but that was a shocker for me. He says, just graduate, make your millions of dollars afterwards. He says, I believe in you. You know, don't let this reflect that. And the funny thing is, not too long ago, the president of Concordia sent me a congratulatory letter saying, you know, I'm very proud of what Concordia alumni are doing. And I said, if only he knew I got a D on my entrepreneurship midterm, he would have laughed. So yeah, so I went to school for management with a minor in marketing, and got really involved with everything here, hands on, and I attribute a lot of my success to the skills I learned while I was at school, mostly through the extracurriculars, but also the one thing I took away from school was I learned the theory of learning, if that makes sense, right?
Learning how to learn.
Learning how to learn. So for me, that was one of my biggest successes. And you know what? Sometimes people ask if I would have just gone straight into entrepreneurship rather than going to university, if I would have been as successful earlier. And I really think my time here at Concordia, and we're actually in Concordia right now.
Well, John Molson is right behind us.
Exactly. I think my time here at Concordia was very helpful into helping contribute to the right skills, even though they may not have been directly translatable from what I learned in the textbook is applied to exactly what I learned in applying today. The process of learning how to learn and those connections I made were absolutely valuable for me.
And speaking about the space that we're in as well, then you were also involved with District 3, where we're recording today. Was that during your time or was created
So
afterwards?
District 3 was created after my time at Concordia. And again, I'm a huge entrepreneurship geek. I just, you know, I love to support founders. I am a founder myself. You know, when people tell me, I had a developer of mine tell me, Phil, you need a hobby. And I literally told them my hobby is building businesses. You know, like if I had a whiteboard session and we were to brainstorm 10 new business ideas, you know, that's my idea of having fun, you know? So I just love my very first version of my resume had the word builder across the top. And it still does today, although I don't set up my resume very often. It's typically because of fundraising or different needs that we may have there. But that's why I consider myself first. I'm a builder. I'm a techie second. I'm in fintech third. But for me, it's all about building and creating value, and so that's what I'm excited about. So yeah, I got involved with District 3 through they had a course here that taught the lean startup methodology and customer discovery and how to build that. So I was one of the coaches there to help the entrepreneurs get the products up and off the ground.
Because before launching Mylo, you had other entrepreneurial experiences.
I did. So when I graduated from Concordia, I was like most students, pretty lost and didn't know what to do, and being torn in multiple different directions. So I said, you know, do I go to consulting? And I actually got a job offer in consulting that I was seriously considering. You know, they flew me out, gave me the limo service in my interview, did the whole thing. It's pretty glamorous. And I was
Even
like,
after a D? Even after getting a D in school?
even after getting a D in my midterm, I still graduated better than that D. But yeah, I still got a great offer. And again, it's all about work ethic and creating the right problems, and finding an interesting way to solve those problems. So yeah, that actually came pretty easy to me to be able to go and track that offer. So I was seriously considering that. I was also seriously considering joining a startup. I had an offer from a very successful founder. He had a $400 million exit back in the day on one of the core chat messaging platforms before the AIMS of the world. And he, successful serial entrepreneur, and had an offer to go and join him in New York. For pennies. So it's like a $30,000 a year offer with a nice upside for commission, but it's hard to live in New York for $30,000 a year. And then, you know, I said, both of those are interesting options. I'm sure I'm going to learn a lot in either option, but I really love entrepreneurship. I really love building things. So I said, you know what, I'm going to go out and do it myself. I spent $6,000 and I built my first company right out of school. And you know what? I call it my real life MBA because the skills you learn being thrown out into the world and trying to start your own company is unlike any education you've ever done before.
And what was this first company?
This first company was patient care reporting for ski patrollers. So back in 2013, there was a new law that went into effect that dealt with how electronic medical records were managed, and essentially just making sure that they had disaster recovery plans, making sure they had backups in the right locations. You had access control to make sure you could had an audit log of who accessed which records at what time, and the scope of what industries were covered under this broadened. So before it's just doctors and hospitals, but it broadened scope. So I went after the ski patrol industry, and they were doing everything on a paper-based platform. They were being sued because someone may have misspelled the word "the," and it said, was this person really in the right state of mind to be able to provide medical advice and training if they can't even spell properly on this? So they were facing lawsuits for silly things that were easy to catch with things like autocorrect. Um, so I built a fantastic product. So did the customer discovery. I went out, learned how to build a website, marketing skills, sales skills, driving to every single ski resort and pitching this idea. Got the specs directly from my clientele as well. Outsourced the product development to India. So pretty much what I was doing is every day getting started, doing all the sales and marketing and operations I needed to do. And then at night around 1 a.m. would kick off with my team in India, wake up at 6 a.m., answer any questions they may have, go back to bed for another hour, and then wake back up. And by 8:30, I was wrapping up the day in India and starting my day again, being an entrepreneur. So that was quite the experience. You can imagine how many hours you're putting in, being the person who's driving that pretty much single handedly. And the biggest lesson I learned going through and launching that first product, the product was amazing. Dealing with ski patrollers was fantastic. They saw a real improvement in their processes after using and adapting our product, but the sales cycles were really long. This was not a revenue generating center for the mountains. They had gone through a couple tough winters, so revenues were already down, and they were not looking to spend, and especially spend somewhere where it's not bringing in new cash. Even though there's these new laws that were applicable to them, they didn't feel the pressure to abide by them because they didn't have anyone who had outed them or anything from that perspective. And ski patrollers are typically volunteer based employees, so because it's volunteer based and it's only a couple months out of the year, it was very difficult to coordinate with the right person. And usually they maybe worked a second job or worked a primary job, and ski patrol was their passion project. So um, and ski patrol is really limited in scope. So, 650 mountains across the US. If I would have been selling a $1,500 a year annual subscription, which is pretty much the price point that they'd be willing to handle for a product like this, you're talking about $1 million a year business. And $1 million a year business, when you put in sales and marketing, development, and all of that, you're pretty much um, self-employed rather than building a scalable business. So that was my first major business lesson I learned, was the difference between self-employment and building a business, and how do you really build something that's scalable to get to that point. So really happy and proud of the product I built. I'm not going to call it a failure by any means, but it wasn't the success that we had all hoped for when I launched my first company.
And how then did you transition out of that? What was the moment you said, okay, I'm going to move on to something else?
So we had a product that was already built. I had a product that was already built, and a technique for I had my prospect list and everything. I was sending emails. I was continuing to do that work, but that died down with the season dying down. So I started my second business and kept the first one operational. And I had a couple companies, so I was essentially running two companies at once. But SkiPSR received a lot less attention than a full-time company needed, right? I said maybe I'll run this as a passion project, and eventually realized it just wasn't economically viable to run that business. So I transitioned into that second company. which was restaurant discounts for students during off-peak hours. So a restaurant would have inventory they have to get rid of before it perishes, and students get off class at 3 o'clock. So how do you shift traffic over to restaurants and help them kind of peak shave their hours, make sure that they use up all their inventory? So I completely opposite vertical than the regulated, vertical as in beforehand. Went from the medical space to restaurant discounts. I built a fantastic business within 6 months, and yeah, within 6 months we had 250 restaurants on board and 25,000 users here in Montreal. And again, did it on a very shoestring budget. I was bootstrapped on my first two businesses, and for just close to $12,000 of development work and a little bit more for marketing. Started a pretty awesome business back in for called My Piece. Ended up selling that business within 6 months to a marketing agency here in Montreal, and and after that, took all of the personal finance, and that's how I got into Mylo. So took all the personal finance skills that I learned bootstrapping my first two businesses. My friends were getting jobs at tech firms and marketing agencies, making good salaries, and here I was wanting to live the same quality of life that they had, but just at a fraction of the price when I was bootstrapping. So um, a couple of things helped me. One, how frugal I was and being able to continue to find these deals and do the right things. The second was having access to US fintech apps that my peer group didn't have access to. So I started adopting these fintech apps without really knowing they were fintech apps. I'm just like, yeah, this is a cool concept. I'm going to use it.
Did you know what fintech was at that point? Like, had you
Not
heard of
really.
it?
Like I just saw the concepts and I was like, I really like these concepts. I'm going to give it a try. So I
And how did you find them?
just by being a tech geek, right? It's just in my DNA to go out, and I'm an early adopter of many products and services. I love giving everything a try. So it's just something that I discovered organically and started signing up for.
Do you
So
remember some of the earliest fintech apps that you used?
I do. There's actually one that's pretty similar to Mylo, and they're up to a couple million subscribers. And I think I was one of the first 500 people on their platform. So again, very very early on into that, and then just started adopting them. And I actually had a very similar profile to what you see in U.S. fintech consumers. Is you'll get one consumer that adopts multiple fintech solutions, so they try them all, but they don't adopt them all, right? So I adopted one or two pretty significantly, but not all of them. And that's one of the problems with US fintech is that the market is so competitive. There's so much money to spend with the consumers. Like everyone has a million users on the platform, but you know what? They're probably sharing a good 350, 400,000 of the same user base, right? So are they really a million users? Or are they a little bit less? And that's when it's important to look at engagement metrics. And I would challenge that a lot of US fintechs don't have the engagement metrics that you see some of the quality Canadian fintech or international fintech companies having. So that was an interesting learning that I didn't realize until someone pointed it out in conference. I'm like, yeah, that's totally me. And then asked a couple of my US friends and said, yeah, that's totally them too. So yeah, I used these US fintech apps and became really good at bootstrapping and really good at personal finance. And eventually my friends and family were asking me, how did you go to Vegas for $500, flight included for your whole trip? And, and still be able to do all these things. And how did you, get an awesome car loan at, less than a 1% interest rate for that car loan? And just being really, I guess, hands-on and frugal, but
Hunting for deals as well.
hunting for deals, yeah, price hacking, whatever you want to call it. I started giving those tips and tricks to my friends and family and said, you know what, this is what I want to do. I want to get started in this space. And I would say I had two fantastic mentors. I've had a lot of fantastic mentors that I still keep in touch with on a regular basis, but two of them particularly Jay and Dominic First from First Capital Partners, were looking to invest in my piece before I end up selling that company, and were mentors to me as a founder myself. And I sat down with them afterwards, and they were the ones who really introduced me to this concept of fintech, right? They had a fintech accelerator that they were running, and I mean successful fintech entrepreneurs as well, selling the last business to Scotiabank. So I think that's when my kind of concept of fintech really materialized into, oh, there's a whole thing around this, and this is how this industry works. And they were the ones to really, I always knew it was there, but they were the ones to kind of bring it to light for me.
Yeah, really cool. And then now we're back at present day with a company that's thriving. Could you give us a little like perspective of where you see Mylo going now with all these previous experiences, with all your lessons learned? Where do you want to bring Mylo to?
Yeah, so the application that I wanted to build originally was one that's able to go through and utilize all your data, your profile, to be able to do that price hacking for you, right? And your insurance renews on a regular basis. So how do we go through and make sure they have the best deal when that renews, and how to make sure that you have the best auto loan for your car, and all this stuff. So all the things I was really good at doing, and I was doing manually, and um, that was that was essentially the idea behind Mylo, what we wanted to do. But no one wants to download an app that manages that. It's boring. It's something everyone knows they should be doing, but pushes off for another day. So the idea of the roundup and the idea of be able to save and invest your money is a way to build a relationship with the user. It's how to get them started, how to build the right financial kind of habits without having to change any major habits as well. And it's kind of like a one step at a time type of profile. So that was why we wanted to get started with a roundup and help people. It's the first step to achieving their financial goals, but achieving your financial goals is a bigger picture. So where I see us driving Mylo into the future is really one platform to manage all aspects of your financial life. I call it the WeChat for financial services. So if you know anything about WeChat over in Asia, they actually have a platform that allows you to chat with your friends primarily, but then pay for your Uber, apply for jobs, book your groceries right there. And it's a whole entire ecosystem. So you can live off this one app for all aspects of your life. Mylo wants to do the same thing for all aspects of your financial life, right? So if Mylo is successful with what we intend to do, you will actually delete your banking app off of your phone, and you will use your Mylo app to be able to aggregate all the activities that you want to be able to do. You'll still be doing them with your primary bank, but you'll just be doing it through the Mylo interface rather than through your bank's interface. So the benefits of doing that is, rather than having 4, 5, 6 different mobile apps, I have insurance with Sana, I have insurance with TD, I have an auto loan with BMO, I have my banking credit card relationship with National Bank. Rather than having all of those apps on my phone, I'll have one interface to be able to do different things. I'll be able to do institution to institution activity without having to log into one or the other to be able to make that happen. So that's the big vision for Mylo and where we want to drive to in the future.
And any short-term objectives that you guys have that you could share with us?
A lot of short-term objectives. So as you know, we just closed a Series A financing round. So that Series A financing round of $10 million was announced just 2 months ago.
Congratulations.
Thank you, thank you. It was a long time in the making. We're really excited. National Bank led our Series A with participation from Desjardins, who led our seed round, and First Capital Partners and Ange Quebec Capital.
How was that, by the way? Because like, did you ever raise money with the two others? You said they were
I had it.
bootstrapped. So,
They
so
were
this was
bootstrapped,
the
absolutely.
first time that you raised millions, but plus in double digits, 10 million. What was that feeling like?
Yeah. So large learning curve for sure, and a lot of relationship building. So I think my first lesson we talked about was the difference of self-employment and building a business. My second lesson is you never get married on the first date when you're dating. So same thing happens with VCs. You never get married on the first date. You never. It's a relationship that builds over a period of time. You're never gonna bring on your first VC immediately through that. And I think that's the biggest mistake a lot of people do is they go out and they pitch and they're like, okay, I'm pitching. I'm ready for capital tomorrow. I want to close in the next month. And it's like, no, there's no relationship, there's no dynamic, there's no past history. It's gonna be very difficult to make that happen. One of the interesting things about fintech, and I don't know if this is a Canadian trend or if this is a global trend, but a lot of the traditional VCs would take a look at a company like Mylo, which is a fintech company that has regulatory, has security, cost us it literally cost us $1 million to build our minimal viable product. We could not bring on our first customer without going through all of the things that we needed to do to be able to make that happen. Some people argue minimal viable product should have been smaller, but just in general, that's in fintech you have to do things that you don't have to do in the article. So if you're looking at a dating app, right? You can build a proof of concept in a hackathon weekend, 48 hours, bring on your first customer, get some feedback, and do that. So a dating app may have 100,000 customers, and a fintech app may have 100,000 customers. The VC will take a look at both of them almost equally because they're looking at traction and not realizing that the value of a fintech customer is a lot more because that's a long term play. They probably realize it, but more risk associated with monetizing a long term relationship. So almost always someone will take, okay, 100,000, a transport app versus 100,000 fintech app. I'm going to invest in the transport app because they get a lower valuation. They get the lower money and capital needed to get started. So it was quite a difficult time raising our first two rounds in the Canadian space. You take a look at the US space and you try to raise from US VCs and they say, okay, well, that's great. When are you coming to the US or when are you going international, right? No US VCs wanted to invest in a Canadian fintech play that was only focused on Canada. Even if you had international ambitions, they said, okay, well, let's talk when you get to that point. So they have so many great companies in their own backyard. It just doesn't make sense to invest in a quote unquote cute Canadian fintech, right? So it's one of the challenges that as a fintech founder you have to go through, and that's why we got a lot of great support and a lot of great love from the Canadian VCs, but where we found the money was through essentially CVCs, corporate venture capital. So Desjardins coming on first, and National Bank coming on second, and First Capital Partners being our kind of friends and family in early on rounds and investing all throughout the way. Um, all of that came through because they had a lens and on fintech, and also because there's some strategic component to what they were all doing. So that was our path to success in raising our rounds here.
So now that you raised, moving forward, what's the idea? What do you want to do with that cash?
So international expansion is a big part of that. So we announced that we're going to Europe next. Again, for some of the reasons that we talked about, the U.S. fintech market's crowded. The cost to acquire is a lot higher than some of these other markets. We like being a first mover in our market, even if it's a validated concept elsewhere. You can be a fast follower and a first mover at the same time, and that's a recipe that makes a lot of sense. So we're going to Europe next, and we're really excited about that in 2020. We're launching some new products here in the Canadian space as well, and looking to grow pretty aggressively in the Canadian space. Lucky for us, our unit economics actually makes sense. We're a company that charges a little. So our business model is a $1 or $3 a month subscription fee, flat, with no additional management fees or charges on top of that. And we're a volume based play. So with the 500,000 people on the platform, you're able to go through and generate significant revenue to be able to go and make those unit economics actually make sense. So for us, we have a nice payback period. We have a revenue coming in. It's that helps us kind of plan for the long term by doing so. So path to profitability for us with the next round of financing. And profitability, a lot of people ask us, why do you want to be profitable? What does that look like? Um, I guess there's two reasons for why profitability. The first one is optionality for fundraising, right? You're not fundraising out of desperation. You're fundraising based off the fact that you can use the money strategically to do the right things to really add value to both your user base but to your shareholders. The second is if you focus on getting to profitability at some point, you don't actually have to be a profitable company, but you're building a company with the right sustainable metrics, right? Your unit economics absolutely makes sense, and that's one thing I tell people to focus a lot on is making sure that you're not going in with a lost leader without any way to monetize later on. Um, so we're building a company based off of the core values of building a company, and not some of these inflated or hyperinflated metrics that are just driving towards a quick exit and a quick failure, which we're seeing some in the news these days with some of these big tech companies. So building, if you're focused on getting to the right profitability metrics, you're focused on building the sustainable, economically viable company that you should be building.
And I hope Europe pans out to be that for you guys,
Yeah.
especially going to Europe. How was there? Because like you mentioned, you're dealing with regulation, especially here in Canada. Europe, it's different. Was that a big barrier, or was now that you have that experience dealing with Canada, it was easier going moving to Europe?
So not all fintech companies are regulated, but I would say a majority of the fintech companies, or a majority of the fintech companies with a strong enough mode or strong enough value proposition, will probably be regulated in some way, shape, or form. So, um, in my mind, I attribute fintech and regulation to be one and the same, and that most fintech companies will be regulated. And for that reason, you will see very few fintechs being able to scale globally because of exactly that barrier, right? It's just as hard to launch in Canada as it is to launch in Australia, as it is to launch in the US. You have to go through the same local fintech regulation to be able to get up and running. And that's why we're seeing less global players. You know, you launch a dating app, you can launch in 36 countries at once, and all you have to do is localize it to the language. Here, you could literally be thrown in jail if you don't if you don't do it. So for us, that was definitely a consideration. So when we looked at globally, what do we want to do? We had the banking landscape. So what does the banking infrastructure look like? We couldn't go to Africa because Africa pretty much went from a straight cash economy to a straight mobile economy. They didn't have the traditional banking infrastructure. So the way our product would have to be completely re-engineered for an African market. Although there's a lot of really exciting things happening in fintech there, it wasn't the right fit for our solution without having to completely start from square one. Um, so the banking infrastructure is one. The regulatory infrastructure. Why we really like Europe is because in the EU you can passport. So once you're up and running in the first country, you can go to the rest of the countries. The overall mainland Europe is twice the population of the US. So there's a large opportunity there that people, in my opinion, pass up on. But we also looked at South America, looked at India, looked at Asia, and just that was a big thing for us, having a single currency to be able to go through, be able to do things like pre-authorized debit. What does the investment landscape look like? What does the time zone logistical issues look like? So we mapped out the whole market on a matrix, and that's how we ended up on Europe.
Very cool.
Yeah.
Um, so to wrap up, what I would like to discuss is just you've founded three companies. The first one, this last one being in fintech. You already mentioned some intricacies to building a fintech startup. Is there anything else that you realized as a founder that you could share with other fintech founders about the process of building a fintech company?
Ooh, fintech specific? No, because fintech is such a broad and special kind of breed. So I'm sure we could probably talk an entire hour on that. But the two lessons I'll talk about are more generic for any founder in general. So the first one is really focusing on the customer discovery process. At the end of the day, you can have a hypothesis, you can have a set of skills that you're interested about, but the product that you build should be one that's built by the consumer. You go back, you listen, and you identify trends, and you put together the right product, you iterate on that product, you build that product with customer feedback. But at the end of the day, that's how you achieve the right product market fit. That's how you achieve success. You know, you don't build and they come. It's you build something small and based off of market feedback, and then you go back, you iterate on it, you grow and you grow and you grow, and that's how you build something that's the number one fintech product in Canada, like Mylo is. So that's the first lesson, and the second one is a little bit more generic, and it has to do with being a founder yourself. The only difference between success and failure is giving up. I truly, truly, truly believe that if you have enough endurance, you can put your ego aside. Your skin is tough enough to take all the rejection because there's a lot of rejection. There's a lot of bad days. There's a lot of things that people are shitting on you all the time. You have to be able to go through that. And if you're able to continue to power through all of those negative things and continue to be focused and drive, um, then you will find success, right? You will always find success. You might pivot. It might not be the same idea. You might think about wanting to launch a gym and you end up launching a juice instead. And that's what finds the product market fit. But at the end of the day, you take that feedback, you will always be successful regardless of the situation. So, unless you do something in fintech that lands you in jail, but so
Hope
that's
not.
let's hope not. And then, so I guess when you think about this idea of never giving up and why, it boils down to why are you doing what you do. And if you're looking to make a quick dollar, there are a lot easier ways to do so. Go into investment banking. You can go and become an influencer and make some good money. You could go into real estate. Like there's so many ways to make money, and that's easy to make money. compared to starting a business. So you really have to be in it for the right reasons, because if you're trying to do this to get rich, you're going to give up because you need that drive. So for me and for Mylo, it comes down to our core of what we do, and it comes back to our social mission. So for us, it's helping Canadians achieve their financial goals. It's this idea of financial inclusion. We don't talk too much about it in the Canadian space, but there's a largely underbanked population here in Canada. So, for me, it's how do we build products that are affordable and accessible for everyday Canadians, and how do we help them ultimately achieve their financial goals? The thing that keeps me going is the accounts that people send us. Stories of getting engaged. One guy proposed to his husband based off of savings he saved up for on Milo. Another person took a first backpacking trip, and we have these really cute pair of dogs that were adopted based off the Milo funds that someone had, and they send us updates and pictures of the dogs and say thank you again, and it's the most heart melting. It melts my heart. Like it's beautiful to be able to see. So having a social mission definitely helps you drive to what you want to be able to do, and that's what helps you from not giving up. So you don't have to, building a business doesn't have to be mutually exclusive from having an impact. You can do both of them at the same time, and that's what Milo is all about.
It's just amazing to see your progression, because I bet on your first start, you would have never thought you're where you're at today with this company. But the lessons you learned, you dealt with regulation with the ski patrolling, then you learned about personal finance through building your second business in the restaurants, and now all those lessons learned have built up to, are integrated and are infused with who you are and what Milo is. So even though it doesn't work out from day one, you just keep pushing through. And
It's a journey. I was talking to a group of high school kids last week, and they asked me, Phil, did you think that you were gonna be as quote unquote successful? And I don't think we're successful, but we haven't made it by any means. But they said, did you think you're gonna be as successful as you were today? And you know what? Sometimes when I look around, I still think we're a 6-person company, and I still think we're in a garage, quote unquote, to be building this. And that's not the case. We're close to 45 people now, close to 10,000 square feet here in St. Henry, and it's quite amazing to see everyone in one space. And I'm like, where did all these people come from? I hired each one by one, but when you see them all in aggregate, it blows your mind. So um, as an entrepreneur, you have to be a little crazy. You have to be thinking about the dream a little bit more. And of course, I thought every one of my startups was going to be the most successful billion-dollar business there ever was. But at the same time, you still stay grounded on kind of like day one. So, it's so much fun to see where we're at today, because, it's growing a lot faster than I expected it to. Although I always figured, where we're going to end up. And I think you have to have that vision in order to get there. It's amazing. It's a humbling experience to be able to go through that.
last question: any books you would recommend to people listening?
Books I'd recommend. Yeah, absolutely. So we talked about customer discovery, and there's the Lean Startup by Eric Ries, which is a must read for everyone. If you're looking to start your company, you definitely need to know that one inside and out. And if you don't want to read it, watch YouTube videos about it, listen to podcasts about it. It is literally the formula to starting your business. The second one, Blue Ocean Strategy. So how do you capture uncontested market space? I think that's a really interesting way of approaching how do you put the strategy behind how you build your product and what you're looking to do. And the last one is actually one from a friend of mine, Gilad, over at Clearbank, recommended to me recently, called Monetizing Innovation. So I haven't started this book, but I'm really excited to read it over the Christmas break. And it's all around how do you price the product correctly, right? And it's how do you value innovation? How do you do things the right way? So I'll be able to tell you soon what I think about that one.
Book recommendations from an entrepreneurial geek himself. Thank you, Phil.
Thank you, Nick.
Thanks so much for being on the show. Really appreciate it. And best of luck in 2020. Excited to see where Mylo goes and to which new heights you guys reach.
Thank you. And I'm really excited to see how the FinTech podcast evolves and all the great things that FinTech Cadence does. I mean, they're a great organization. Definitely go check them out.
Cheers. Thank you. Thanks.